Greetings and welcome to PowerTeacher Pro Gradebook. This review is going to cover versions 12x and 19x of the PowerTeacher Gradebook, and I'm going to be showing this on my PowerSchool 19 version. However, there's only a few minor differences compared to the 12 gradebooks if you are still using that. So hopefully you will like what you see here today, and you will have a better idea what's to come if you're still using 12 and needing to go 19, or if you're on 19 and haven't had a chance to explore any of the new features. So my name is Tracy Roberts. I'm going to be covering PowerTeacher Pro Gradebook only during this session. If you are new to this completely and you are looking to know how to take attendance and utilize that portion, please reach out to us because we have a different separate recording already available for that. And it's also located on our consortium website, PowerSchool 21, if you need to create an account to access our pre-existing documents that's in our consortium area and don't have that, please reach out to us at application support so we can get you that information. And I'm going to close this and move on with today's show. Okay, so what we're looking at is my current grade book from PowerTeacher Pro point of view and from PowerTeacher point of view. And from what I'm showing here, like I said, if you need information on understanding all this area, please reach out to us as we do have a different recording. However, PowerTeacher Pro is where we go to launch the gradebook. If you want a shortcut into the gradebook from a specific class, so if you want your gradebook to open under, for instance, my Keystone Algebra, I can click that and it's going to open. Otherwise, when I click PowerTeacher Pro, it's going to load, and if you're brand new, you're going to see a page like this one. So this is what's called the Get Started, and this is always available, located under the help area, and it gives you a little bit of breakdown on how to just maneuver around your system. So we're going to cover everything on how to create assignments, covering categories, how to copy assignments in from previous years, how to enter scores, and all of this information that gets entered automatically flows back administratively so that teachers, grades that go in, the administrators can then run progress reports and report cards, or the data is showing up on the parent portal for them to view. So no matter how the grades are done, when your grades are entered here, the information automatically converts back into those locations. There is no longer a mobile app needed for this gradebook, and there is no longer any need to install a shortcut launch, which has been the case for many years leading up to this change. So if you have, even if you're on a tablet and you needed to access your gradebook, you just need to know your school's IP address, and you're putting in teachers, and that's it. So you're just going in through your browser to open up your gradebook and you're entering your information. Aside from the getting started, this area here, let me turn this off. There's also an area that will cover what's new. So anytime there's a version upgrade, so if you ever get notice from your school administration that your server is being upgraded, and there's a change to the gradebook possibly, you can click in here what's new, and it will take you through what's been enhanced, and it'll actually provide you video guidance instruction on what has changed. There's also a very useful tips and tricks. And there's also the help screen, which is really useful and helpful to help guide you through the gradebook, should you need to reference anything. You can search by topic, you can index it through the contents, and just by clicking on any of these items, it will help guide you through the gradebook. Another area across the top that you might find useful is obviously your name. Your photo might be there. You can change the font if needed. And it just changes the screen size. And if you needed to go back into PowerTeacher to take attendance, if you click on PowerTeacher here, it will return you to that area. Sometimes you can right click and open it in another tab. And I have this open here. My gradebook is open here. So just a little bit of a shortcut on that. One of the things you might also be seeing is this message across the top of my page that talks about grades and scores. This is coming from the admin side, and it's a setting that is optional for your district to put in place, but it shows the how long you might have to enter scores up to the end of the term. This is the classroom drop-down bar. If you teach in more than one building, they will show in the parenthesis abbreviations here. You can see I teach in multiple buildings, so they're broken down. The items here on the side is quick access to the score sheet, and this is a quick access to graphs, and there's also quick access to settings, which we will all be coming back to. But this is an area that has just quick items, and if you have a tremendous amount of classes, you can search and filter them out. For instance, I know I have a Spanish class. If I start to type, it will narrow it down. You can also group your the classes can group. So I have 3 classes at the Carbon-Lee High School and 10 at this Camptown school. So if I only wanted to focus on those, areas, I can see which ones I'm using. If I click here, it'll show me the assignments I'm using here. We'll be covering how to create the assignments. Maybe it's because I do training, but you'll find what your rhythm is. I just kind of like having my stuff as all, but I'm sure if I had a tremendous amount, I would want, to do that. If you have been on the Pro Gradebook in the past, and this is, you're on this for your second, possibly third year, you can change your term into previous years by selecting this drop down, and you can go into previous years to view grades and setups and attendance, that have been, items that have been taken that you may have tracked in your gradebook. So for the previous school years. Okay. One of the very first things that we're going to discuss is the create plus symbol here. And what this does is you can either create a category or create an assignment as a quick entry. And we're going to talk about categories first. So categories have to do with being the filing cabinets of your assignments. However, some districts have preset categories in place that they may have created and pushed out to their teachers. Some districts may allow the teachers to create their own categories, and some categories you may have used and find that you no longer need can be set to inactive. So clicking here allows for a quick category to be created. However, I can also click over here under the A+ on the left side called categories, and I can see any of them that I've used before. I also can see some that contain the schoolhouse. The schoolhouse means they were created for me by district office. Let me just go over to my class here, because I know it was easier to see on this class. I must have less categories. And if I have categories that are inactive that I'm no longer using but would like to see again, I put a checkbox here and they will show up down at the bottom. But to create the category, if I click on category and it's going to open up to create it, it's going to ask me which class or all classes. We're just going to create this one for Spanish today. I'm just going to call it Spanish homework. It's for this class only. It's active. I can set assignment defaults. For instance, I want it to be points always, but I could say, you know what, for all my homework for this class, I'm going to set them at 10 points, but I'm going to give up to 5 extra points for extra credit. My scores, when do I want them to be published? You have the choice in this drop down. And these are all just defaults to the assignment. This is not the assignment itself. This just means that every time I make a Spanish homework assignment and associate it to this category, that some of these settings are already going to be in place. However, I still would have full control over those individual assignments if I needed to make adjustments. And if I needed to view other categories, you know, just to make sure I'm not already using something like that, I can do so. I click Save. And I now have a Spanish homework category. Just because I labeled it that doesn't mean I can't use it in other classes. I just have a lot of different classes on my test server, and I have a lot of categories over the years that keep building up. So creating the category is very simple. Creating an assignment, you know, can really be just as simple as it is. So one of the things, though, is a lot of the districts, you have been on this system for a long time, whether you were on the old gradebook or whether you've been on Pro. But regardless, you can copy assignments from either location. So before we create an assignment, I just would like to move over to the assignment list that I have. And I would just like to discuss copying these assignments. So under the grading A+, and I click the gear, I can choose to copy assignments. This is where I can choose if I want to copy assignments from previous years and or even previous versions of the system. So if I was on the old gradebook, the PTG gradebook, up until this school year, and I want 18-19 data, I can copy that out. So when I click, for instance, that I want to copy, what class do I want to copy to? I first have to select where do I want to copy from. So I'm going to say I want to copy from my 18-19 Spanish 2 class. And I want to copy it into the 1920. Now I can select more than one class to copy into, but for today I'm just copying it into the Spanish 2, but I could select any one of my numerous classes. So over here it will tell me where it's copying to. Here it tells me where it's copying from. Then the due dates, I can choose relational, custom, or existing. Well, I don't want to choose existing, but I can do relational so they fall in line with time slot that I ran them last year. And I can still make adjustments to them moving forward. So here is all of my assignments for Spanish 2 for last year. And if I don't want to look at it from this point of view, I can at least change it and say, you know what, let me see what I had going on last year during the month of September. So those are the ones I'm going to focus on for right now. I'm going to copy these out. But if I wanted to, I could copy them. I could copy them all out. So you have some flexibility there. And what I would recommend is when you are doing this, consider setting it up for one class, and then make sure you have it the way you want it and make the adjustments appropriately that you would like for the 1920 school year. And then go back to your copy assignments and copy them from this current year 1920 into your remaining 1920 classes. So 4 assignments were copied, and I click over on my assignments list, and they're now added in. Because I already had similar labeled assignments, it added these extra dot ones behind it just to make it more unique so that there's no duplication. Over here, this will tell you what you scored or didn't score. And then on the far side will tell us if we want to edit the assignment. But if I needed to go back at all, or I needed to go into another term, I can click this drop down and switch over and view maybe what my upcoming quarter 2 assignments are at this point. Let me just go back to quarter 1 though. And I would like to just show how to edit an existing assignment. So this assignment is being used across multiple classes that I instruct. But maybe I want to have different due dates. So for instance, I know I have September 6th on some of these, but we never got around to it running a little behind. So I'm going to change it to Monday. And I can save, and that's going to update as needed. If I wanted to make a brand new assignment, I could click here to create assignment. And I actually think I want to create this under my technical English class. So even though I'm under Spanish 2 and it's defaulting to that, I can unselect that and I could actually say technical English. And I need to give it a name. And I can assign it to one of those categories. These are all my active categories. At this point, it is not showing me inactive in this listing. And I can change the due date. And if I wanted to, I could associate this to any numerous classes at this point. I can put in a description. Telling my students to study. Telling them that the test is coming up. And actually, I'm saying it's a test. I'm actually going to adjust that category, and I'm going to up my points to at least 25. I can also make a decision over here if I wanted to add or remove students. So if I have certain students that can be exempt from taking this assignment, I can uncheck them. I can also choose if my scores are going to be published or not. And if this assignment also has standards, I can decide what standards are associated to this assignment. At this point, I can either save this or I could save and close it. Now, if I choose to save it, I get an option to duplicate it. The duplication process is it takes this assignment, obviously duplicates it, but maybe I want to change it up a little bit for a different class. And I'm going to associate it to this class. Oops. And I'm not going to use it in my technical class. And I can change the due date. Make this one due on the 19th. And I can say that maybe there's only 10 words on this test, but they're going to get extra points. They'll get up to 5 extra points. And when I save and close that, it is now associated to that class. And this is why it's telling me I'm not seeing it here, because my class up top was not switched over. And so for that, it wasn't showing it, but it's showing it now. So, and that's listed down here. Okay, so it's showing how to create an assignment, duplicate an assignment. And they can all be linked to all classes. One of the things I do like to point out that is important to note about a duplicating assignment. So if I just click on an existing assignment, the duplicate comes up. Be very careful if you choose to delete an assignment. One, make sure there's no grades, but two, be very careful to see if it is linked to other classes, because if you choose delete and you only meant to delete it out of the class you were working in, and you don't realize at that moment that it's linked to these 10 other classes, and I choose delete, it allows that delete to take place without much warning. In fact, there was no warning at all. So you want to make sure that you're very careful with this if you do choose to use that option. Okay, let me close that. Now my school uses traditional and standards grades. Some schools use only traditional, and some of you listening today might only use standards. It would be important for you to understand when you've gone through your training process to know how your school reports those grades out, because that will determine how you choose to score items or set up your grade book. Some of these items, as we'll talk about later on, could be already set up and in place by your school office for you, where the old gradebook didn't have that flexibility. So I'm going over here to the A+. I'm coming over now. I'm leaving the assignment listing and I'm clicking on the score sheet. So in this class, I only have 2 students. I'm actually going to switch over to a different class just so I have more records. I'm going to go down to my plumbing and heating class. I have numerous assignments created, and I have numerous assignments scored already in this class. When you click on an empty assignment to score it, the score sheet will appear then on the right side of the screen. PowerSchool also in this version also impacts teachers who may at one time have created their own personal codes to use within their gradebook. Some may have had an exempt code, some may have used band, for instance, maybe because that student left early, they'd leave early and go to band. In the new gradebook, that flexibility was removed, but the system does allow for special codes to be created administratively and linked into the grade scale. So right now, this is showing me that this is a 25-point assignment, and it's out of, it can go up to 30. It's showing me here, and it's numeric. Now I can enter these by my keyboard. I can enter a score by clicking here. I can do a mass fill. The rest of them are going to get a 28, for instance. I can put the score in and choose fill, and it flows down the screen. It also allows for mass filling to the left. However, the assignments all need to be in the same value, and that is not the case in this particular setup. However, this setup here is out of 100 points, and this one should be as well, and it is. So you can actually copy the assignment score and click on the assignment title and click paste and fill that in. If you wanted to, you can make any necessary adjustments to whoever may need it. And so that's a bit of a time saver as well. So let me see if I have one more. It's 20, and this one should be out of 20. So again, I'm clicking on the assignment title, and I choose copy, and I click there again, and I choose paste, and it fills it in. And again, I can make any necessary changes. Once you choose save, this column here is your final grade column, and that column is going to update. This is the column for Q1 that is going to flow back to the parents, the students, the report cards, the progress reports, etc. If I needed to add a special code that I had mentioned, I can choose codes, and these are the ones that are on my test server. Your district may or may not have similar or may not use them at all. It just depends on their setup. And I could choose alternate. I could choose absence. I could choose missing and overwrite those scores. Now, what's nice about the codes is these show up on the reports, but these boxes, so let me just show you here. So if I click missing, and I click collected, and I click late, they made them these like colored symbols, and I understand why they did it, but I do know for a fact that there's been issues with these reports not displaying these colored items. So having the alternative codes and adding them as an alternative code can assure that your reports pull them appropriately. So if you're having issues with that and need them, I would definitely reach out to your contact at your school district to see about getting them updated. And we can work with them on doing that. Okay. Any student that is not given a grade, for instance, let me see what this was out of 50 points. So if I gave this child a 49, and now I'm going to start to get grades in, and I don't grade this student. I don't grade Trevor. Not putting a score in automatically treats that as an exempt. If I put a 0 in, it's going to treat it as a 0. But not scoring it will keep it as an automatic exemption. Okay, so just a heads up on that. For those that have used score comments, these do show to the public side, but they work just like they did before. You know, click in an area where there's a score, click on this comment flag. You'll see the show comments below, and it will generate your school's, this will generate your school's comment listing. And you could put an individual comment in for a particular student on a particular assignment. You know, maybe they did really great. That assignment comment is not going to print on report cards, but it will show to the parent, student, and administration on the portals for them. If you wanted comments for report cards, however, this is the area you would do that in, and the same goes for progress reports. So if I needed to add a comment for Trevor, in this column, I just click in here. And the comment bank, schools have different rules on these. These are my test server comments. However, some schools allow teachers to write their own. Others have to use a comment bank. And let's give him, I'm going to give him a slightly negative comment. And if I go down to the next student and I want to give them maybe one of my favorite comments, and I add that, I do have the flexibility to mass fill comments, and I do have the availability to clear the comment as well. So if I click back, I have the comment in place. It's only going to go down as far of who doesn't have one, and I do fill. It's going to ask me, what do I want to fill it with? Do I only want to fill it with the comments? And so all of my remaining students now have the comments in place. So knowing which comments are right for you is key. So what I just showed here was a score comment. What I showed here is a traditional grade comment. But let's talk about standards a moment. Some schools that utilize standards, the comments pull directly from the standards area. So I would like to show that by clicking my A+ and clicking on standards. And this class has standards, and it is showing I also have traditional grades, but if you are a standard school and you have an item like this looking back at you with the comment marker, that's what this is needed for that to pull out onto your report cards. Some schools allow for free text comments to be created. If that's what's allowed. It also will tell you approximately how many characters are left. And this is another important area because there's sometimes limited space on the printed report cards. And because of that, especially to a district new to PowerSchool reporting, sometimes these character limits have to be adjusted. That's all. To prevent that from going down. But I have the comment in place, and just like we did before, I could choose to fill this down. And so there's nothing else going on that standard, just the comment. But I do have flexibility, like I did with the assignment score, to copy the score, and I do have the availability to paste that standard score. Depending on how your district utilizes PowerSchool, some districts may have assignment scores calculate out the standard score. PowerSchool's also created a few other items with comments. And that brings us to comment verification, which is found under the A+. And I click on the verification. So this is showing me the student. It shows me that they have a comment. That's why that's here. But it shows me what the comment is. If I needed to adjust comments, I could do that here. And maybe I need to remove the comment. I can do that as well. And I could say clear comment. Or maybe I just want to give them a different comment. And you can move your students up or down in this area as well. And if you needed to adjust this for different terms, you could do that as well. wanted to mention the final grade status, which you might be seeing at the bottom here. We've shown the districts under our grade reporting training that the teachers can utilize this item here called the final grade status. This will trigger a report back to the school administration at grade reporting time that your grades are complete. It does have to be done per individual class, and if this checkbox is not in place, it will come up as not completed. If the checkbox is in place, regardless if there's a comment, it won't. So the checkbox has to be there. Your school administration can then run a report to double check that, who all completed their grades. So this checkbox is set now for this class. Like I said, it would have to be done per individual class so that you can say that you officially validated your scores. And you can get to this final grade status from other areas too. You can get there from clicking on traditional view, which will also show if there's an accumulation of missing. Let me go back to that class we were on because I had some of those. So it'll show an accumulation count of missing, later, incompletes, that they have comments, where there are absences. And I can say from here, again, if I needed to, that my grades are definitely validated. Wanted to show category totals. It shows how students are doing in a particular breakdown based off of the categories that their assignments are linked to. Notice there's no final grade status here. And I also can see that I haven't been giving anything in my work as having classwork as a category. So I know that I also have to adjust that as well. Another one down here called all reporting terms. All reporting terms is a great feature. I do find that you have to add extra columns and then hit enter on your keyboard. So I put 6 in because my school has 4 quarters, a final exam that's scored separately, but everything factors into the Y1. And I can help to see that my data is progressing as expected. Another area that we can move on to has to do with students. So when you have students, you can look at them from individual views, and you can look at them from individual assignments. So let me just kind of start back under the score sheet. And every student that you're kind of scrolling over, you can see that you can click on. So if I clicked on Carly, I can see what items I have scored, where I have given comments for, how many standards, if your school utilizes them, what the due dates are, what our overall grade is. The grade is also displayed here as well. If I needed to overwrite this grade, maybe Carly went out ill, and the rest of these items are not going to get completed. So I know that her current score is an A. However, I'm going to set it to an I, and I can keep her percentage as is based on my school's policy, and I can save that. Her score is now overwritten. So let me just show you from back on this other view. Looking at her score sheet, it shows this little black triangle. That represents nothing I enter is going to change that overwrite. So even if I started entering scores for her and I saved it, her items are still staying the same. If I needed to undo the manual override, I can just come in here, and when I click on it here, it shows up here, and there's this refresh arrow. And when I click on that refresh arrow, it takes it off. And if I wanted to adjust this score a minute, just to have you see a bigger change in her score, and I hit save, her values are going to change and her data is going to update. Students also have, oops, let me click on Carly here. I wanted to just show you from this point of view. So I was showing you from her assignments. But from their assignments, you can also do other shortcuts. You can look at comment log. So this will show you where I, entered comments for. There was the work ethic assignment, but then here was her final standard comment score. So I can see that that item was entered. You can see student demographics. You could see the student's individual quick lookup page. It's a good point of reference because then you'll have a better understanding of what your parents and students are seeing when they log into the parent portal. Standards, if I choose to expand all, this is also the same view parents and students would see when viewing those scores. These are all just a view only area. If you needed to, you could jump back to the PowerTeacher portal where the attendance area is taken. Let me just show you a few other items here. We talked about her assignments. We could look at her standards progress. You can get a little more in depth by clicking on the score itself. And I only have a few things for her, but you can get into the area and see where she's falling within this scoring average. Oops. So I want to move into showing you drop students. So if you have students that dropped from any of your classes at all, it's obviously defaulting to this class because that's where I left off, but I can switch things to all and I can click show dropped and I do get 2 students showing up. I can still work with those students as needed and I can still update their grades. And I can see where items were last left off. And I could even do a manual override on a grade if I needed to. She has no comments. Back to her assignments. And she does have some assignments in place and some of them were scored and maybe I need to update them. So it's showing me where she is left off. And I'm under her vocab, it's 25 points. And I could just use the down arrow to keep filling in the grades that I'm scoring for her. This one marks her exempt. This is going to be marked exempt. And then lastly, her book report. And I can save those changes and it's going to update. So I'm going to show you a brief video clip of a new feature that is now available in PowerSchool 19 on students when they are new into your classroom. So let me just show you. As a teacher, you would come into your students, you click show enrolled, and actually I know I put students into my class down here. So when I click on students for Spanish 2, I will see their names listed here and the date that they enrolled into my class. When students transfer into your class, whether it's from your own class, so maybe you had a student switch from a period 1 class to a period 3 class, and it's the same subject, just a different time. Maybe you have a student that transferred from one math teacher to another math teacher, or reading to reading, or language arts to language arts. But basically the system has a new area that allows for you to transfer scores. This is in 19 only, it is not in 12, and it is a new piece. I take things like something like this with caution, that you make sure you're very cautionary with using it and making sure you're copying exactly what you expect to copy. So I'm just going to show you this little video clip of what they have about it, because it's quite useful. And let me just get that going here really quick. Okay, so I have this little video clip that I think is a very informative way to see what's happening. Okay. Okay, so this is what this is showing here. So let me just show you from the student I was going to use. And this one is from, I need a different student. Okay, I needed a student that actually had assignments from their other class. So I have one here, and that's exactly what they were showing you here. So I've actually, yes, they're a German 3 to a Spanish 2. However, I decided I'm going to use some of those assignments to help generate the student's final grade. Again, I just stress, caution with that, just because you want to make sure you're bringing in the right data. So the student's outgoing grade was a C, and right now there's nothing, in my current setup. But from here, I can try to make a determination if anything will align with that setup. So let's see here. So I think I'm just going to take the writing assignment and I'm going to transfer it into an equivalent of my solving for X. Well, how do I know this might be a good one? Well, I can click on that info screen and I can see what my point value system is, and it's the match. So because of that, I am going to utilize it. If I come down to vocabulary and I want to try to use it for my August 29th weekly assignment, and I see that theirs is 20 and mine is 10, I don't think I want to utilize that. So I have writing assignment to solving for X, and I do transfer scores. And the grades transferred. But now it's up to me as a teacher to continue either updating her score to make it match the C or doing a manual overwrite. However, it would be more useful in the gradebook to treat this class grade that she just received in Spanish 2. Let me go over there. So the student has 1 grade over here for Spanish 2 that copied over in place. However, it is very common for schools, and it's actually part of our recommended practice, that a school creates what's called a transfer score. And they're very easy to create. They're created as an assignment, and I actually have a few of them already. If I just go back to my assignment listing, for instance, I actually have one that's called Transfer Quarter 1. This is usually in place mostly for all the secondary schools, because they like to show the progression of the student's grade, and they like to get a final average grade properly for the end of the school year. In order to achieve that, creating a simple assignment called transfer and giving it the proper term is sometimes the easiest thing to do. And I have one created out of 100 points and using it for all of my classes. This is still a recommendation that I would follow. Like I said, the copying of assignments from one teacher into another, it would be something to be very closely watched, because I was trying to show an example of how, yeah, my stuff sort of lines up, but it doesn't really. And because of that, when you're doing grading, you really should be careful on how you'd want to handle that. So if I needed to just score a grade for this student, nobody else in that class, for instance, you could say nobody else transferred in but this student, and I could have just not scored this, accepted the 10 transfer, for instance, take that out, and I could have just said, so they had a C plus, I believe, from their incoming class, and I could, issue that out of 100 points so that it gives the proper value of 79. They have 1 score. Quarter 2 is going to start, and they're going to start fresh with all my other students. So this student would continue to look like this, with the 79, in the scoring comment, and it's going to eventually get factored into the final grade to show that. And then with standards, the same thing can apply. The standards grades, if you have to go back, you would just go into standards. And if you have to switch which term you're doing your grade reporting in, so if you're already in quarter 2, for instance, and now you need to go back to quarter 1, most of the time you have flexibility with that. There might be a time when your district locks previous terms out. So if you have this situation, like mine says after October 29th, I can't go back into quarter one. If that is the case, you need to reach out to your school administrator and tell them to unlock you because you have adjustments you needed to make for quarter one. Another area that I'm going to touch on, and that's obviously very important, has to do with settings. And there's a lot of information under here. So first, under display settings, if you are 100% standards and don't give any assignments to trigger those standards, you might not want to show any traditional grades. Otherwise, that should be checked. If it doesn't show up, you don't have a score sheet column with grades showing up. You also get the option of how you want your class names to display. Do you want the section number? Do you, and this is what it's referencing. So that display contributes to that. How do you want your values to display in the grading column? I want to see it all. And standards, if you're using standards, I want them to display. If you are not using standards, but other people maybe are in your grade level and yours particularly not, those can get turned off. Just a heads up, some of these display settings are set by your school district administration, and you might not be able to enter them. Another key area has to do with auto-calculating of standard scores. How do they want them to calculate from the traditional grade? And do you want to say that you have a professional judgment indicator as how the majority grade the standards? In that in place. So these settings, like I said, may already be in place for you, and you might not have any control over them. Down below, though, this you do have control over definitely, is how you want the student names to display, and it gives you a list of options. You can sort students in your score sheets area based off of your preference. And for me, I like to add my new students to the bottom of my list. We saw that when we looked at this Spanish 2 class. I'm able to see them down here, but they can certainly be alphabetized and slipped in elsewhere. And I currently have hide pre-registered students, but again, it's personal choice on what you choose to do there. Save any of my changes. Class descriptions. So this is a little bit easier than what it used to be because you have all of your classes here. It's defaulting to the class you're currently working in. However, you have the flexibility to change your course name. Might make it easier, especially for those health and wellness and art and music and band teachers who have numerous sections of classes with all the same name, possibly across multiple grade levels. You might want to put the receiving teacher's name, or the period, the period that the class runs, something that jumps out at you that you know that it's different and it's easier for you to utilize in your gradebook. I just labeled mine Spanish 2-A, but this is the original course name, and that's the course number and the section related to it. This is what is going to continue to show to parents and school administrators and that. So this Spanish 2A is really mostly linked to me unless I choose to run one of the reports and tell it to use my custom descriptions. The nice part is I can go right down the line and update information. For instance, my technical English class here, I want to make sure that my final grades are being averaged and how parents and administration knows how I'm utilizing my averages. So I put that description there. So there's some helpful stuff here. You can copy and paste. If you're pasting from Word, it'll keep the formatting, and that's what this is right here. I mean, you can have pictures. Yes, you can do a lot of little bit of different things, and you can just keep, going down the line there. back under settings, comment bank. Just a heads up if you're interested. If you had a set comment bank, this must have been something that they had a lot of requests about. But basically, you can add to an individual comment bank, and you can insert smart text. Now, this is for a teacher-driven comment bank that is not being driven by your school administration. So like I said, a lot of schools say, here's the comment bank you have to use, but there's just as many schools, especially at the elementary level, that allow more free text comments. And if you have a lot of that, you might be very interested in setting this up, at least as a good starting point to alleviate some of the work that you used to have. And you can filter things out, and you can also reference, again, the district comments to say, you know what, I have a few favorites that I'm going to add, and by starring them puts them at the top of the list back on the score sheet. Student grade scales. Currently, if you have a student that needs different instruction within the individual classroom and shouldn't be getting the regular grade scale that the class is utilizing, it's possible that a student could be associated to a specific grade scale. So if I needed to put a student on a specific scale, like a pass-fail, different from everybody else, this is something that the district should be telling you about, for you to come in and say, oh, okay, great, I can now utilize these grade scales. And when you put a student on a different grade scale, so let me just switch over to my journalism class. Score sheet. They all have this orange triangle to let you know that they are on a different scale. So yes, I can score them, but now it's going to update them. But they're flowing in with everyone else. And it's nice because you're able to at least see where they stand. And if for some reason that needs to go away, then they just become unassociated to that scale. Another key area here is called the traditional grade calculations. So the traditional grade calculations, let me show you this, has to do, some of this could be coming from your school administration and it be already in place. And some of this could be coming well within you, the individual teacher, and setting it up maybe the way you used to, or just to make things specific to your school's guidelines. Some of them have to be left as being edited. If they are not allowed to be edited, you'll see a schoolhouse area. So let me just show you. You might find that your term Y1 is not able to be edited, and it's already set up for you to fully average out the grades the way you want it to for a final end of year calculation. So that's a Y1. My journalism class up here is a semester 1, and that too is already set up for me. However, maybe I do have the flexibility to do category weighting. So if I do, I can click the pencil and I can set up the items that I would like to see attributed into my final grade for that term. So you can set one up, make sure it's how you want it. And then what you can do is you can click the gear shift and copy, and it'll ask you within a class or to another class. And I always recommend you do at least one class first. Make sure it's how you want it for one class before you change it up for another class. So I'm in journalism, and I'm going to stay in journalism. And it's going to ask me what reporting term. It's going to be quarter 1. I'm copying from, And I want to copy 2, quarter 2, and I can validate that, and it looks good. So now when I look at quarter 2 for my journalism, it's in place. And so what happens is semester 1 is already set up appropriately. It can now take an average of this, an average of this to get a proper average of this. And these two are what my preferences were. And this is how it's going to calculate in the grade book. Once you have these items in place, so let me just kind of go down to Spanish a moment. So this is what I have for quarter 1. And I want to copy within a class. And I'm going to say, here's Spanish 2. A copy from quarter 1. It's going to ask me, where does it want to go? I want to send it to all 3 of these, because I don't need that for my final exam. My final exam is total points. So that copies that. I do validate. It looks good. I copy it, and it's good to go. So since I have a few other year-long classes, I could take this information and do copy again. And I want to say copy to another class for the 1920 term. I want to copy from Spanish 2. And I want to copy to term quarter 1. And I'm going to copy it over to my advisor. That is not configured. That is correct. I do the copy, and it brings it in, and I can keep proceeding until I'm finished. But like I said, your district may already have some of this in place for you, and it may save you a bunch of time this coming school year. I just would like to note that co-teachers can only copy calculations to another class, but only when they're linked to that other class. So if they're only linked to one class, they can't copy it to another one. Another important piece to understand that you'll come across is under the score sheet again, and it's up at the gear shift, and it'll tell you about recalculate final scores. So like I just updated a bunch of final grade calculations, and because of that, I should run this piece. Another time that this will occur is if you are using maybe a grade scale change across all the students, something on the back end had to get updated. There might be a time to time when you are asked to recalculate the final scores. So when that occurs, sometimes this occurs for standards, sometimes it occurs for both. It just depends on the situation. However, you can recalculate scores for multiple classes, and I might as well do our Spanish 2 and advisor, since those were the ones I was copying final grades over into. The refresh the standard scores has to do with, again, if there was a change made in the back end, maybe with some of the possible cutoffs. Throw some scores in here. So maybe on the back end, the values, maybe they went from 5 to 1 to 4 to 1, and the scores need to be redone. Again, you would do that under the, let me save this. So you would be under here, and you would again say we calculate final scores, standard scores. You can refresh the data that's helped contribute to them, and then the data would update. So moving over to the reports. So what they did with the reports is there's less in this gradebook than what there was before. However, they made a lot of options under the format on how to change up the data. And because of that, you kind of sometimes have to play around with it. I'll be honest, I think this could be a little bit more user-friendly based off of what you're trying to do. But the layouts and the format do give a lot of options. It just depends, again, on what you're looking for and for which class. Now, I'm under journalism. I'm just doing most of my stuff under plumbing and or Spanish here. Back to reports. And so here we're looking at the individual student report and the data, and you can choose to run the report. So the report is now being queued. And notice it's thinking over here. One of the things I'd like to see them enhance is, yep, what is this telling me? Oh, I have 3 reports in my queue. Okay. So if I click reports and I click report queue, from in here, I can see all the reports that I have currently generated. I can delete them. I can get more information on them, that it finished, how it was run, when it was run. They're going to generate themselves in a PDF fashion. One of the things though, and then it would just come into your downloaded folder. One of the things I just like to really mention with reporting is, play around with them, but I highly recommend that anybody listening to this training today, make sure you have a backup of your grades. There's a lot of schools that use third-party programs that bring grades in and out of the gradebook. And that can make things, you're adding a different element to a layer of something else. So meaning it's not owned by the gradebook company, not usually, sometimes they are. And, things sometimes happen. And in order to prevent those sometimes things from happening, or to at least prevent a headache, I'd really recommend that from time to time, even if you did it bi-weekly throughout the year, if you come into your report, come into the score sheet, click on the format, set it to portrait, set it to Excel. You can put a note. If you needed to. But basically, when your criteria is filled out, it's asking, what class or all classes, you can just kind of hammer this out. Do you want that custom name to display that you set up under your settings? How do you want the students to come out? What is it here that you want to show? Do you want all categories? What reporting term? And maybe a date range, because like I said, if you got into the habit of doing it every other week, you could set your date range, and you can then do your run your report. And the reason I stress having this type of report is because if something does go wrong with your grades, having a backup like this, there are ways to bring some of this data back a little bit, without it being completely lost. It's just good to have a backup. There are ways for us to get a backup, but you're still left maybe having to do a little bit of manual work that you wouldn't have had to have done. And when I mean for us to get a backup, we're putting it on a different server, and it's just another way for you to pull it off. So you having a score sheet report that's available for you to reference from time to time, I just think it's a wise move. So I'm just putting that out there. And there's just a few things that just wanted to mention. We're still hoping to see some enhancements, obviously, to this gradebook. Some of the things we've been asked that is not available yet are student groups. This class email is a customization, so if this is something, you know, you're a consortium member not seeing that, please let us know. We'll get that added for you. Again, teachers not being able to define their own personal scores, them coming from the district level. But basically, it's a pretty simple gradebook to use. And that video clip I showed earlier, if you wanted to review any of that, you can go right to videos, and it's going to show what's new. In all the versions, it just goes backwards. So it's a good point of reference. And that would be it. So I thank you for your time. I hope that you got a lot of useful information out of this, and have a good day. Oh, one thing. You probably already signed off, but try to remember to sign out of your gradebook.